I want to talk Jalin Hyatt, his 40 time, and why I think it was disappointing. Although, if you look at the NFL Network and you look at Tennessee's coverage, they had him running next to Julio Jones in this kind of where he's a shadow ghost, and Jalin Hyatt outruns him at the end. Well, Jalin Hyatt outran him at the end because Jalin Hyatt takes a little bit longer to get up to full speed. So his last 10 yards of the 40 are more significant. In the end, it was a 4.4 flat. Didn't get in the 4.3 range, which I thought he would. Hamstring made him pull out. He'll be at Tennessee's Pro Day on March the 31st, so he can take care of that if the hamstring was the issue. But here's the other thing. Julio Jones is like 220 pounds. Jalin Hyatt's 185 pounds. And to me, I thought a 4.4 flat was disappointing. And don't think that NFL defenders don't see that you could bump him along the way. Exactly right on the message board. And don't think for a second that defenders aren't going to see that you could bump him and slow down his top speed. Caleb, if I'm Jalin Hyatt, I'm not real happy with what happened in Indianapolis.
No, I'm with you. I'm not either. And it's funny. We had Fred White on Friday, and he called you insane when you said you thought Jalin Hyatt was a bit of an overrated prospect, and his selling point for Hyatt was his speed. Well, if you're a wide receiver and your speed is your only selling point, then you need to be fast. You need to be faster than average. You can't just be fast. You need to be extremely fast because Jalin Hyatt's route running is not – honestly, there was nothing to prove. Nothing about his route running was a proven commodity when he played at Tennessee. The routes were very simple. You're right. He's not a tall receiver. He's not a physical receiver. We've talked 1,000 times over how Cedric Tillman is actually a better NFL prospect than Hyatt. Now, not hitting the 40 time the way you need. He is one of the guys whose 40 time actually legitimately matters. And he didn't. I thought he needed in the low 4.3s, not just 4.3s. I thought he needed to be pushing into the 4.2 range if possible, if he was going to be a decent NFL prospect. And 4.4 is that's for Jalin Hyatt specifically not going to cut it because I don't have any proof. I don't see anything of him being an elite route runner. Dave, do you?
No, and he may end up being a great route runner. I mean, I've known of a lot of players that were average at certain things in college, and they go to the NFL. A guy says, "I'm going to rebuild you," and they have done that. I know a lot of examples of that, but Jalin Hyatt may be that guy. He may be a great route runner, but we don't know it now. I tell you what, when I look back over the combine, kudos to Darnell Wright, a guy that does all the right things, moves to right tackle. He solidified himself as a first-round NFL draft pick. There's no question in my mind he's going in the first round. The other guy that I really like, although he didn't throw a single ball, is Hendon Hooker. Gets up there. The guy hasn't said the word me or I since he's been at UT, especially last season. It was so frustrating when he wouldn't want to talk about his own play. Please hit that like button, the thumbs up button. We greatly appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed yet, you need to do that now. But Caleb, Hendon Hooker gets up there and he says, "Hey, I can't help it if all my receivers are open and my first read's not open." Now, I know he's saying the right thing, Caleb, and I think this is a one read, one side of the field system, but he's saying the right thing. He's saying that they move so fast that that's a lot to have to deal with from a quarterback's perspective. So there shouldn't be any issue with him handling the speed of the game or the complexity of the game. I loved it. I loved what he said over the weekend. Again, it was coached, but he brought up a lot of good points. And I think Hendon Hooker has helped himself just by being around and being in front of cameras and answering some of these tough questions. Because imagine if you had a ton of success at any level. And Caleb, they said, it's all because of who you work for. It has nothing to do with you. It's all because of who you work for. That's why you had success. I'd have a chip on my shoulder.
Yeah, I agree. I would too. And I'm with you. I think the intangibles that we've talked about Hooker's intangibles for the longest time. He's got great intangibles. And I think there's enough evidence in the NFL now where it's not like the 90s or the 80s, where in the NFL now, even if you're a system quarterback, if you have certain abilities, then NFL teams will be able to tailor their offense to what you can do. I think, and also they can kind of rework you. Look, I'm going to invoke the name. I'm not saying Hendon Hooker will be this good. For people who don't remember, Aaron Rodgers was a system quarterback coming out of college. Jeff Tedford was a system coach in Cal, and Green Bay, that's why he had to sit for 3 years. Green Bay had to rework his footwork and everything like that. Well, then he became a Hall of Fame quarterback. And
that's why he wasn't drafted until, the 27th pick, too.
Yeah, it was really low. Yeah, and that's why when people are like, oh, the 49ers had just drafted Aaron Rodgers. Well, if the only reason he worked in Green Bay is because they spent 3 years having to retool his fundamentals. And they may not have done that in San Francisco. And so, yeah, and now more teams, more NFL franchises are like Green Bay than they are San Francisco now from back then, where more NFL franchises, they work with quarterbacks to try to retool what they can do. Patrick Mahomes was a system player, ran the air raid, never had a winning record, I don't think, at Texas Tech. Andy Reid drafts him, sits him for a year, develops him, and then he's already, we may be watching the greatest quarterback ever in real time right now in Patrick Mahomes. So,
no, and Hendon has all the intangibles that you would think that he's going to be able to adapt to that. He was able to adapt to a new system with Josh Heupel. That was vastly different than what he ran at Vol Tech. I think he's helped himself tremendously, and it's by being a little bit selfish and a little bit defensive, and I think that's cool. I'm down with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's coaches are selfish and defensive all the time when they defend what they've done. And so why can't quarterbacks? Josh Heupel, when he was hired, was asked, why did UCF regress every year under you? And he really defended what happened, about injuries and key issues and things like that. And he really defended the fact that his legacy of following Scott Frost and still having to maintain the success he had. If coaches can do it, why can't players?
Yep. Elias says Hendon has to be talked about relentlessly by some folks that are interested in taking a risk on someone with room to grow, right? Yes, I think he does. And I think he will be talked about those guys. And he's a guy that everybody's going to look at partially because of the ACL, which those are non-factors nowadays. ACLs back in the day were a huge monstrous factor, but they're really not unless you get a bad surgery, which happens about 1 in 10,000 times. And that's not going to happen. And with Hendon in particular, yes, you have to look at the room to grow. But could he step in and play? Let's say he's 100% recovered from the ACL. Could he step in and play tomorrow in the NFL with an off season? Yeah. I think he could. Would he benefit from sitting a year like you mentioned? Absolutely. But listen, Hendon Hooker's a smart guy. With an off season to prepare, he's going to be ready to play. I don't know that it behooves him to play immediately, but could he? Yeah, I wouldn't rule him out.
I wouldn't either. I could easily see him playing. I don't think he'd be good his first year if he played with just one all season, but I think he could do it. And, we've seen some bad quarterbacks play this past year. So, I know you're not a fan of him, but it's like, if the Cowboys can retool their offense mid-season in 2016 to fit Dak Prescott after Tony Romo was supposed to be their starter, NFL, we have enough evidence that NFL offenses can adjust quickly and quarterbacks can adjust quickly. That was proof right there.
I agree completely. And the other guy that helped himself, I want to get to, brought to you by AndyMasonRealEstate.com. AndyMasonRealEstate.com in Knoxville. Man, over 40 years of experience. AndyMasonRealEstate.com has the best prices, the best service. There's nothing like AndyMasonRealEstate.com for your real estate needs. Make sure you reach out to Andy if you're buying or selling a house. The other guy that helped himself, as you smash on that like button and be sure that you have subscribed. The other guy that helped himself, Byron Young. I don't think there's any question about that. We talked a little bit about that last week. I have a different view of him all of a sudden, and was talking to somebody over the weekend that knows both players. And he's a tough guy to kind of quantify. And this guy wanted to be sure and said, I'm not comparing him to this guy, but maybe a little bit of a poor man's Leonard Little. That was pretty. And he said, I don't want you to use that. But I did. But maybe I'm not going to write it. I've got another comparison. I'm going to have former Vols up later today that these guys compared to. But even to be discussed in that context is pretty strong. And I think it's because he's able to dip his shoulder. He gets low. He doesn't lose speed when he's running almost parallel. I like Byron Young. I did not realize he was as explosive as he showed up at the combine.
Yeah, and Fred Wright brought up a really good point that like he was still actually relatively raw when he was producing at such a high level for Tennessee for 2 years. Which, in my opinion, I always thought the opposite with Byron Young. I thought Byron Young lacked certain athleticism, which kept him from getting a high-profile scholarship anywhere, but just was really solid fundamentally and things like that. But I'm hearing the opposite, which is incredible because that means there's huge room for him to grow. And so you're seeing real potential with Byron Young. I mean, I could see. Look, Byron Young, I think, was recruited as an outside linebacker before he was a defensive end, and I know Leonard Little played. No, Leonard Little played middle linebacker, didn't he?
Well, unfortunately, he should not have. He played middle linebacker. He was lost, only made plays because he was an incredible athlete, and then they moved him to defensive end where he should have played the whole time. They should have had Al Wilson as an underclassman at Mike, and they didn't because they didn't think he was quite ready. So shoulda, coulda, woulda. But Peyton probably has a national title if they do that. But anyway, it's a whole different discussion.
He may have one if they start Jamal Lewis by early in the season too. So
right, they make those. Yeah, that's very fair. All right, so if you're sitting at pick number 35 and you need a receiver and you need a defensive end pass rusher / linebacker, are you taking Byron Young or Jalin Hyatt?
And you need both?
You need both. Equal needs.
Byron Young. That's not even a question to me. Yeah, I'm taking Byron Young. That is an easy one.
Me too. And I don't think we would have necessarily said that before the NFL Combine.